Our next video is Genesis chapter 12. Last time we looked at the covenant or the promise made to Abraham at the start of the chapter, Genesis chapter 12, verse 1. The Lord has said to Abraham, "Get out of your country, from your family, from your father's house, the land I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you. And in you all families of the earth shall be blessed." Then I'll pick it up at verse 4. So Abraham departed as the Lord had spoken to him, and Lot went with him. Abraham was 75 years old when departed from Haran. Abraham took Sarai his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their possessions they had gathered, and the people whom they had acquired in Haran, and they departed to go to the land of Canaan. So they came to the land of Canaan. Abraham passed through the land to the place of Shechem, as far as the Terebinth tree of Moreh, and the Canaanites were in the land. Then the Lord appeared to Abraham. Notice that God spoke to Abraham again, or Abraham. "To your descendants I will give this land." And there he built an altar to the Lord, who had appeared to him. And he moved from there to the mountain east of Bethel, and he pitched his tent with Bethel on the west, and Ai on the east, and there he built an altar to the Lord, and called on the name of the Lord. Here we want to speak about Abraham's altar, the altars that he builds here in Genesis chapter 12. Here we see twice God spoke to Abraham in verse 1, and then God spoke to Abraham again in verse 2, or Abram. "To your descendants I will give this land." And Abraham's immediate response is to build an altar to the Lord who appeared to him. And then we notice in the next verse, verse 8, that Abraham built an altar to the Lord and called on the name of the Lord. So the first obvious point is that Abram built altars to connect with God. Verse 7 we're given it's because the Lord appeared to him, and in verse 8 he calls on the name of the Lord. And these are very practical things, and really it reminds us that the priority for a Christian is connect with God. We connect with God through prayer. See this in verse 8. He called on the name of the Lord, and we connect with God by listening to what God has to speak to us through his word. In Abraham's case, verse 7, the Lord appeared to Abraham, but in our case, the primary way God speaks to us is through his word, and so it reminds us that we need to connect with God each day. The second thing it shows is that Abraham had to offer sacrifices for sin. One of building the altars was to offer sacrifices for sin. That goes right back to Genesis chapter 3 in the garden. But here we see that Abraham builds two altars, one in Shechem and one between Bethel and Ai. Well, these are the place where he would offer a sacrifice for sin. Now, today we don't offer a physical sacrifices or animals to deal with our sin, but we do have to offer 1 Peter 2 verse 5, spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. The spiritual sacrifices are the things that we give to God: our time, our effort, our money, our prayers, our devotion to his word, our time with God's people, our serving God. They're all spiritual sacrifices. The third thing was the altar was a demonstration of submission to God. Here we see in verse 8 in particular that he called on the name of the Lord. So here we see this was Abraham submitting to God. And in the Bible, James chapter 4, it says we are to submit ourselves to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. And again, Ephesians 5 verse 21 says, submitting to one another in the fear of Christ. That is part of being spirit-led, is submission, not just to the Lord, but submission to one another. And then the last thing is, the altar was a means of worship. This was how Abraham would show his worship, and by building these altars, and this is a feature of Abraham's life. And we know this when we get to the second half of chapter 12. There's no altars in Egypt. That reminds me of Romans chapter 12, verse 1. I beseech you, therefore, brothers, by the mercy of God, present your bodies a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service, or as different translations have, your act of worship. And so the altar of Abraham reminds us of four things: connect with God, reminds us that we submit to God, reminds us that we need to worship God, and also to offer those sacrifices. Thank you for listening.